Hello, everyone. Welcome to Clarity 16.0.1 Supportability Training. My name is Dave Sprague. In this section, we are going to cover the 16.0.1 status reporting updates. So what's new? So the status module has been refactored to use what we'll call the configurable canvas capabilities. These capabilities were previously only available for agreements and now are available for projects, ideas, and custom investments. That canvas is used to really design the layout of your content. So in addition to that ability to configure, preview, and publish in a PDF format, status reports now have the added flexibility to incorporate saved views. Secondly, the status module PDF export capability has been enhanced to include output formatting options for screen size, such as letter or A4, and then orientation, whether you want portrait or landscape. You do all this while you're in the PDF preview mode. As an aside, that underlying PDF export technology has been replaced, the status report technology has been replaced in favor of the same tooling and use for roadmaps. So why is this important? Well, the status module with its configurable capabilities was really part of the customer innovation program. Our customers have been telling us that they really wanted the saved views for status reports that allows them to define a default layout or a default view or multiple status report layouts. In other words, multiple views, and share those across multiple project managers. And then from the added output formatting options while in PDF preview mode, we added those really to meet the needs of stakeholder communications. And users are looking for added controls to determine that page output or size, pagination, and or landscape versus portrait. So we're really pleased to be able to deliver these capabilities. So what's changed? So here's a look at the status module itself once you enter in. I'll kind of give you a quick tour here. It's got a breadcrumb in the upper left. There's the ability to preview, navigate to that PDF preview mode. There's a configure function to actually navigate into that canvas and configure the layout. And additionally, at the top, there's the ability to create and create and manage saved views. And this page has really been optimized for 4 columns. And here's a couple examples of the saved view capability. So as I mentioned before, customers are asking for ways to define a default layout. Imagine the left-hand side is that corporate status report standard. And create that view with whatever content you wish, push that out to your user community. The right-hand side is another view. And this one is for the Alpha division. There's a specific project manager that looks after other content and doesn't need tasks. They don't need those other components that are on the left-hand side. So by stripping out tasks or risks and changes, they have yet another view that they can save and push that out. So here's a look at the configurable canvas that is accessed right from the page there, from that view page on the configure button, and it takes you immediately to the canvas. Left-hand side are all the options or elements that you can drag and drop. Put them on the right-hand side, where at the end of the day, that's where you do your sizing and final positioning. The canvas allows for those rich text fields, same as the prior release. There's some new elements that we're adding. We'll call them a table widget for tasks, risks, issues, and changes. Those can be sized to consume either 2 or 4 columns. Talk a little bit more about what goes into those table widgets in a second. When you're in PDF preview mode, the experience is pretty much the same as before. However, we've incorporated some additional controls on the right-hand side there to format the output in terms of sizing and orientation. From a status report perspective, the letter size, 8.5 by 11, and orientation of portrait are the defaults. But you have multiple options here depending on what device you expect to be using the information. and also if you want to kind of control for pagination as an example. So once you select publish, you'll close the PDF preview window and you'll return to a new report draft version. That published report, its status is updated to final and the latest flag is set. And then that PDF file is stored in the database, but is available from the attachment column in the grid. So you want to make sure that when you're on that grid, you include the attachment column, because that's where you're going to be able to get to that published PDF report. So here's the grid behind the scenes. You'll notice that on the upper left sections, those are not the name is not a link any longer. However, the attachment field is, and that's where you get to your published PDF report. That the bottom row is an example of an existing report that's in draft mode, and that becomes a link to take you to the report that you're working on. So let's get to the demo. A couple things, we just want to walk you through the status module and its new configurable capabilities in the context of a project. And then as we're doing that, we'll leverage the PDF preview capability and the new output formatting choices, and then ultimately export it to PDF. So let's switch gears and go to the demo. So just kind of back up a second here. What I've done is I'm going to start here at the project view, project grid view, navigate to a project, and I'll hit the status module, and we land on the viewing portion of the status report. I'll give you a quick tour here in a second, but the general principles apply for configuring PDF preview and publishing, but each of those capabilities have been significantly improved from a user experience perspective. So when we select status and come into this view, you're always going to be directed to the current draft. In other words, you're not going to be navigated to a grid. You're always going to come to the draft. So I'll come back to these in more detail, but real quickly, preview is where you're going to go to the PDF preview and manage its layout, or the output. Configure is where you're going to use that canvas, the configurable canvas, to design your report layout. And of course, save views, we're applying those here to define a default layout or multiple layouts that you can use across multiple project managers. And this reports link here is that breadcrumb that takes you back to the grid where you would view all or current past reports. I'll scroll down the pages to show you a couple things. Many of the items that you're accustomed to using in 16.0, these are included and are editable in this view. You can set all these schedule status, report status. You have the flexibility in this mode to configure and set those values. These cost and effort metrics have really been refactored from a visual design perspective. Pretty nice. These are not editable. They're just reporting data from the underlying investment, as you would expect. As we scroll down, you've got your rich text editor, rich text fields that you can incorporate. These are kind of a custom attribute, right? And you can include those. You also see what looks like some grids. We refer to these as a table widget, but you can I've included tasks, risks, issues, and changes. You may or may not use all of them, but for demo purposes, I've got them included here. These table widgets are editable. You can directly influence the data as you see fit, changing any of these things, which was something that was not available in the prior release. For example, I'll change the status here from started to not started. You'll see that reflected there. Just real quick, I'll go to the tasks module, and I've got a save view in place just for our demo, to filter down the list, but you can see I just changed that from started to not started, and it's reflected here. I'm going to go ahead and remove that view real quick just to show that there are, in fact, I believe there's about 22 tasks that are associated with this particular project. So you just see the breadth of information that's here. And I'll go back to our status report, and we have filtered that down to roughly 5 items. These grids, they, as a default, will consume 5 rows as a minimum amount of real estate, and that'll become more apparent when we get into the PDF preview. So let me come back to this this widget again. I can use the search box, right, and filter down anything that I want to. That again is a net new piece of capability. I'll click on configure. This brings up 2 things. This is where I apply filters and add some additional attributes. So the column configuration panel is consistent with behavior that was in the prior release. It's just presented in a different way, which is actually how all the grids work in Clarity these days. You'll notice at the top there's a seeded view, a seeded filter for including status reporting equals yes. So the way in which you include tasks or risks, issues, and changes in a status report has not changed. You still go and check the box at the end within the individual module for included status reporting, and so this seeded view respects that. Now, one interesting thing is I can take off that filter, and now I've got all of them available to me if I wish to use them in my status report. I'll go ahead and just reintroduce that filter to get it back to where we were from a demo perspective. And click done, and we'll move on. Okay, so one thing I meant to show you while we're still here in this view mode with respect to the configure is the additional filters that are here that are related to the task object, just like the column filters are related to the task object. Now, one thing you'll want to be cognizant of is as far as how many columns you include in here is just think about the output. If you're outputting to PDF, you don't want to have too many columns because they won't be able to be seen in the PDF. Okay, so we've talked about the editing of this while you're in view mode. So there's a lot of things you can do even in the view mode. So let's go into and look at the new configuration capabilities. So I'll go ahead and click configure. So the left-hand side contains all the elements that can be included in the canvas using that drag and drop. And on the right is where you ultimately size and position the elements. So as you can see, I have status narrative that represents a custom attribute. You would have custom attributes showing up here on the left-hand side in kind of this format, whether it's a field or a pull down, what have you. Those would all be available here to drag and drop. Status narrative just happens to be a rich text field that's here. While I'm in configure mode, these are really read-only elements. I'm just here to position and size them, such as the grids here are not editable. It's just positioning and sizing. For example, I'll take this task piece and put it up here above the narrative. Let me just get it up there. I'll get it there, and then I'm going to come down and grab the risk area as well and size that to two columns, and then I'll position them right next to each other. Whoops, get that down here. Lost my other widget, sorry. Pull that down. There we have our layout that's kind of desirable. I'll go ahead and kind of remove all these guys. I don't want those. I'll scroll down to the bottom here. I'll give this a little bit more size. I'll come down to the bottom here, and I'm going to drag in kind of upcoming activities on the bottom, kind of insert that, give that a couple columns, and then I'll bring in my scope explanation, right? And these are fields that I would then fill in. So I'm happy with my layout that I've got here. And so what I'm going to do now is I would hit done. It's going to close out, and I would save this as a view. And I'll just call this my demo view. I'll just do a save as demo view. Save. I can come back in here and I can manage that, right? I'll go manage, and here's my demo view. I won't make that a default. I've still got my standard, and I'll kind of keep that to myself. I won't share it. So that's kind of the basics of the configuration capability. But let's come back to the save views while we're here. Notice that I've done some reorganization here. I'm going to go hit my corporate status report. It's going to bring up a different view. You'll see it's kind of laid out a little bit differently. And so it's got some content, and I can also select the other view, and it has yet another set of pages or elements, much shorter report. So this is the capability that allows me to set up that default view and push that out. I could optionally share this project manager alpha division if I wanted to, and push that out. So we've got a lot of flexibility there. So let me come back to corporate status report. So customers have really been asking us for that ability to define that default status report layout, as you see here, or any other views, as you see here, that can be used across multiple project managers. We're really happy to be able to deliver this capability in this release. Okay, so let's move on to the PDF preview and publishing. So I've selected that view. I just kind of push it. I can press, I'll select preview. And so with 1601, the preview capability includes the added ability to determine PDF output formatting. So you'll see on the right-hand side here, I've got a size option. Letter is the default. I can select any number of displays here. The typical paper size is really these top four here at the top support pagination. So as my example here with letter and I can also pick landscape if I wish. The letter and format, the letter and portrait selection is kind of the default. That'll fit content into an 8.5 by wide by 11-inch container. So which in this case results in a multi-page PDF document. You can see that in action over here. You've essentially got 2 pages for this report. I'll select the 1024 option, kind of tablet option. Now it's gonna ask me to select refresh, which will regenerate the PDF with the newly selected size option. So to deliver this feature as soon as possible, the team decided to introduce that refresh step versus spending extra time having the page refresh on the fly when users change output settings. So in this case, the tablet selection fits content into a 1024 pixel wide container, right? You can see it kind of zoomed a little bit here. And then auto fits the vertical dimension, resulting in a 1-page layout, right? I'm scrolling through it, I see it as 1 page. You can see that in action over here. It's just 1-page report. So I'm kind of scrolling through, and I can see the content is in that single page. When you select, these HD, laptop, fit to content, or tablet, the orientation option is ignored. I can just go ahead and pick that. So notice it's not doing anything. Because each of those selections have a preset width and an auto fit for the height in order to generate a single page. So we thought about removing that orientation option or pull down in this situation, but we didn't want to delay getting the feature out. So we kept it here. We figured we just educate our users on the behavior in this situation. So I guess, after looking at this, I'm fairly happy with the content of the one page format, and I'm going to go ahead and select publish. I'll get a message up here that the report was published successfully, and now I'm just going to hit close. The new flow is that this now returns me to a new draft. A current draft is automatically created. So I would continue working on that and work on a new naming convention and go from there. So let's take a look at what happens behind the scenes in this grid. I want to draw your attention to the last entry here in the name column. I guess it's the fourth entry in the grid. I was working on the 2/22/22, February 22nd, 2022 status report, gave it that same name. You'll notice the name that is no longer a link. I can change that further if I wish, but the name of the status report matches that name and it's placed right here in the attachment field. So that's how you get to your published reports. I'll go ahead and select that. It's going to download it, and I'm on a Mac to my tray, and I bring it up, and this is how I view the report. Looks very nice. I'll go ahead and close out that view. So that was that's stored in the database, and that's how I get to it. But every time I want to look at it, I'll just download it to my machine, and I open it up. And you can see the newly reported draft is right here as an active link, and there's a draft associated with it. The report I just published is right here. It's made it, the latest is populated. The latest checkbox is populated. That's, of course, if I'm using that, I'll see it. And then, of course, report status is set to final. So I'll just go back to my current status report, and I'm back in view mode. So that concludes the demo of the status report updates, the configurable canvas, and the PDF export with its additional output formatting. And that concludes the status reporting updates. Thank you very much. Have a great day.